So I'm not going to well, I'll tell you very quickly these other two. Rachel Zindler, this is going into the Teachers College record, was looking at, I'll just tell you that she was in a inclusion classroom in New York City. This was before 9/11. She was down in Battery Park City, which is the very tip of Manhattan. She had 4 children in her class who were special ed kids, and these children were bussed in every day, and they were African American. So she's in this kind of white part of New York. These kids are bussed in, and she's asking how inclusive is my classroom. When she does sociograms every single month, she discovers that no matter what she and her co-teacher do, in modeling for children, in arranging groups, in doing all of those things, they can't get these kids included in it. Remember my saying earlier about children have to feel secure in the classroom before they can really engage in the academic side of it? These children couldn't feel secure because they didn't have friendships. What changed the dynamic in that classroom was a parent asking each of the kids over for an after-school play date. And it just like, for those children, that changed everything. Now we know, if you look at Rachel's study, you'll see that among the things that had to happen was she was able to take this and say to the school system, if you're going to bus children in, you need to make it possible for them to stay after school and participate in after-school activities. You need to make it possible for parents to get there for parent meetings. They're not simple, but they're doable. And there was an extraordinary change in that school and then that part of the city around the special ed programs as a result of this one little study, because there was data there. Data, it's really important. Okay, the other one is a high school one, because I don't want you to think that just because my area is early childhood that I don't know about high school. So this one is in our book, Ellen's in my book, and it's Carol Teresky is a high school teacher, a number of students in her class, all poor, New York City teacher. A number of the students in the class are speakers of English as a second language. At the time that Carol was doing this study, she had to use books that were either in the book room in her high school, or she had to draw from the list that New York City had. Well, in the book room in the high school were about 60 copies of Heidi, and other things like that. Things that were totally irrelevant to high school kids in New York City, particularly children for whom English was a second language. And so she tried to order off of the high school list, and the books that she knew were not going to be useful to the kids, were not on the list because they hadn't been approved. She ended up working out with Barnes & Noble some kind of deal and writing for a teacher, what do you call those? Teacher grants, donors choose, thank you. But what guided her work on this was this piece of reading here. She's got the research, just like Rachel did, just like Nicole has done. They went and read about what other people were finding about these particular issues. The research in second language learning, time to read. One of the things, Carol begins her study with her own personal narrative about reading as a kid, having time to read. She looks at her high school classroom and there's like no time to read. The kids, it's almost like drill and kill every day. But this helped her begin to make an argument for time in her classroom for real reading. And then choice of reading materials. In her little narrative before she begins this, she talks about how she chose certain books as she was growing up. And then emergent literacy practices. She went back to some elementary stuff. Cunningham and Allington, people like that. So what I'm trying to get at is in each of these studies, we see teachers drawing on current research that is entering the classroom, and their practice is different as a result of what they've read and what they've tried to implement on the basis of what they've read. This is how I think we begin to bring the two together in our own profession, but it's also how we begin to lift the quality of teaching across the board. So as I look ahead for you all, particularly those new people going into teaching, use the data to build the bridges between research and practice. Try out what you're reading about this particular thing. Try it. Tell us how it works. I know researchers would love to have an email from you about something that you tried in the classroom. They'd love to know how it sounds, how it works, what the kids did with it. Don't be shy. We're all on the internet. Okay. Enter into conversation with others. That is a critical piece, and I said that earlier. It's really hard to do this work alone. It is really hard to get those ideas. Share what you're learning with others. Don't be shy about it. And I love that Joe, made them present. And we do this in Teachers Network. You can't get away without making a presentation. In this book that Ellen and I did, our first one, we have a study by Matt Wayne, which you can actually see also on the Teachers Network website. There's a video there. It's called Fishbowl. And I'll just tell you this quick one. Matt, this came at the time that New York State was requiring 4th grade tests. No, I think his kids were old. Can't remember what it was, but there were new literacy standards. And one of the things that kids had to be able to do was enter into a good, they had to be able to defend a perspective, and they had to be able to argue or debate about it. So he had the kids, he had a friend come in and observe the kids. He had made a list of all the kinds of things that the standards were requiring, and they shared it with the kids. This friend came in and observed and basically said to the kids, you're not doing any of the things. Well, Matt's, I think there were 6th or 7th graders, said to him, nobody's going to come in and see us anymore, but we're going to do this. And so he formed them. What they began was this it's called Fishbowl, and he formed these small groups where kids learn to, Joe and I might be buddies. We would focus on a particular part of the conversation. I would watch him try it in the circle. He would watch me try it in the circle, and then we'd get together and tell each other how we did. So the kids began studying themselves. Those conversations between them were very focused on the standards. And what you see, if you go to the teachersnetwork.org website and look up Fishbowl, you'll see the kids talking about their observations of one another and what they learned from doing this. And of course, Matt learned hugely. But drawing on the research. The last piece, and this we haven't talked a lot about today, but the last piece is to publish. If you're in Teachers Network Leadership Institute, you have to publish. And the reason I say publish is because until you do that, you haven't really done the documentation piece. You haven't gotten it past teacher talk with one another. But once you get it published, and we'll do it on the Teachers Network website for you in an instant, then you're out there and other people can draw on it, and you become part of the research side of that equation that I began with. This is such powerful work, and you will find that as you write it up, you understand things that you are doing in ways that you weren't aware of just by talking it. So I leave you with that. I hope to see you all in print soon.